ADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar. Good evening and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide on wadr.org. This is Newslink. Here are the top stories. Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger deployed troops under the unified force to curb terrorism at the tri-border area. Benin gets an area surveillance aircraft from the European Union to beef up its anti-terrorism campaign. The Netherlands contacts Sierra Leone seeking the extradition of a drug lord, and Nigeria and China strengthening collaboration against fake news.
We all know that this is a very serious problem, not just for Nigeria or for China, but for the entire world. The world is grappling with the issue of fake news that we know can really tear countries apart.
Stay with us for details of these stories and more.
Here is Abdullahi Hassan with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast. Newslink begins in the Sahel region because Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, all members of the AES, have deployed their unified forces in the so-called tri-border area. This is part of a continued effort to strengthen their military cooperation. The operation, called Yeriko 2, stayed in the area between February 24 and Thursday, March 6. More details in this report by Augustine Kole.
This is a major step that has been taken according to DEPA, the Directorate of Information and Public Relations of the Malian Armed Forces. The unified force of the AES was deployed in the so-called Three Borders area between February 24 and Thursday, March 6. Called Eureko, the operation carried out a patrol during this period and covered several strategic localities: Tasset in Mali, Terra in Niger, and Mako in Burkina Faso, as well as other surrounding areas. According to the Malian depot, the operation destroyed several terrorist bases in Goma and made it possible to arrest several suspects and seized weapons and logistical equipment belonging to the armed terrorist groups. Operation Yereko 2 was also deployed in the Triple Point area, the exact intersection of the three borders where terrorist groups are actively operating. As a reminder, the Alliance of Sahel States recently announced the establishment of a regional force of 5,000 men, a force with air, land, and intelligence capabilities.
Augustine Kole reporting there. Now, the Gambian National Human Rights Commission has expressed concern over the recent voting in the National Assembly on the Election Bill 2021. This comes after lawmakers voted against the registration of Gambians in the diaspora in a clause in the election bill. The Rights Commission called for the inclusion of Gambians abroad in exercising their franchise. From Banjul, Sankule Janko has more.
The National Human Rights Commission expressed the concerns following the voting in Parliament, which the Commission states effectively denies Gambians in the diaspora the fundamental rights to vote. The recent vote at the National Assembly rejecting Clause 14 of the Elections Bill 2021 has, according to the Commission, reversed the government's commitment to ensuring the effective participation of Gambians abroad in national decision-making process. The NHRC, while frowning on the decision, described it as disenfranchising a significant segment of Gambian society who continue to make invaluable contributions to the country's socio-economic development, contributing 31.5% of gross domestic product (GDP) in 2024 alone. The NHRC states that the Gambia also can, with commitment and willingness, enfranchise its citizens in the diaspora like other West African countries. The Commission therefore calls on the government of the Gambia and the IEC to take immediate and concrete steps to fulfill their commitment to enfranchising Gambians in the diaspora. NHRC further states that every eligible citizen, irrespective of their geographical location, should have the right and the opportunity to vote and be voted for.
Sankule Janko reporting there. Meanwhile, Benin is equipping itself with significant military equipment to better deal with the current security threats in the context of the fight against terrorism. In this regard, the country received a surveillance aircraft from the European Union, which is supposed to strengthen Operation Mirador, which is taking place in the north of the country. Here is one this report by WADR's Cotonou correspondent Aziz Adam Sule and voiced by Christopher Ticho.
This new military aircraft will be used to strengthen the capacity of Operation Mirador, launched in early 2022 against the threat of terrorism. It is a reconnaissance and surveillance aircraft whose aim is to better secure Benin's borders with its neighbors. The ceremony for handing over the aircraft to the Beninese army took place at the Cotonou Air Base in the presence of the Chief of Staff of the European Union and the Chief of Staff of the Beninese Army, General Fructo Gbagidi. Few days before the acquisition of the equipment, Benin consolidated its military cooperation with the United States. On February 27, a 5-year cooperation program was concluded between the Beninese Armed Forces and the American Army. This collaboration is based on 5 major axes: internal security, intelligence, health, logistics, and the fight against terrorism. This agreement aims to strengthen the capacity of the Beninese army, particularly in the areas of military aviation, intelligence, and the training of special forces by 2030. These new security partnerships between Cotonou and Western powers are taking place in a context where Benin is hit by the terrorist threat in its border areas with Burkina Faso and Niger. Last February, Benin suffered an attack in the area claimed by JNIM, which left more than 30 deaths.
A report by WADR's Cotonou correspondent Aziz Adam Sule and voiced in our studios by Christopher Ticho.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
As a reminder, we're live on wadr.org and on YouTube and Facebook. Now, Nigeria and China have pledged to work together to combat misinformation and fake news. Nigeria's Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, and the Chinese ambassador to Nigeria, Yu Dunhai, reaffirmed this commitment to accurate information sharing and strengthen democracy and societal development. From Abuja, Usman Umar tells us more.
During a meeting in Abuja, Minister Mohammed Idris stressed the dangers of misinformation and emphasized the need for responsible reporting.
We all know that this is a very serious problem, not just for Nigeria or for China, but for the entire world. The world is grappling with the issue of fake news that we know can really tear countries apart. Therefore, Nigeria is collaborating with a number of countries using the UNESCO model to ensure that whatever digital platforms are there to share information will be done in a way and manner that will not jeopardize the very existence of the people that it serves, that it sets out to serve in the first place.
On his part, Chinese Ambassador Yu Dunhai highlighted the long-standing diplomatic ties between Nigeria and China and reaffirmed China's commitment to media cooperation and African development.
China-Nigeria enjoys excellent bilateral relations. This is a relation built on the mutual respect, mutual understanding, and win-win cooperation. Over the past half century, actually this year marks the 54th anniversary of our bilateral ties. Over the past half century, we have always stand together. We have always supported each other, particularly in times of difficulty, and we have always respected each other. We keep very close, high-level communications, and our cooperation, in various fields have bring a lot of tangible benefits for both of our nations.
With this new collaboration, both countries aim to curb misinformation while deepening diplomatic and media relations. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
Elsewhere, the Liberian government, under the leadership of President Joseph Boakai, is intensifying its fight against corruption following the issuance of Executive Order 145. This order amends and renews Executive Order 126, extending the mandate of the Asset Recovery Task Force for an additional year. The aim is to reinforce the zero-tolerance policy of the Boakai government toward corruption while enforcing an airtight system that is adequately able to deal with issues of corruption and related matters. Abraham Parker in Monrovia completes the story.
The order is focused on retrieving public assets that have been unlawfully converted for private use, reinforcing the government's commitment to accountability and transparency. The Asset Recovery Task Force, which was initially established in March 2024, is tasked with identifying, tracing, and recovering both fixed and liquid assets belonging to the government of Liberia, regardless of their location. And with this expansion, the task force is expected to continue its crucial work in asset recovery. Key elements of Executive Order 145 include the continuing operation of the task force under the Minister of State for Special Services, overseen by a 5-member committee. The task force is also empowered to collaborate with essential government agencies such as the Ministry of Justice, the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission, the Office of the Ombudsman, the General Services Agency, the Liberia Revenue Authority, and the Financial Intelligence Agency. In addition to its investigative and recovery capabilities, the task force has the authority to impose travel restrictions on individuals under investigation and to engage Interpol and other diplomatic channels to repatriate both suspects and recovery assets. For Newslink on WADR, I'm Abraham Parker in Monrovia.
Staying around that location, the Sierra Leone government has been contacted by the Netherlands over an extradition request for a drug lord. Dutch Justice Minister wrote on X that he spoke with his Sierra Leone counterpart, Alpha Cisse, over the phone about a cocaine kingpin reportedly seeking refuge in the country. David Van Weel, in a statement on Thursday, stated that Joao Lejakers is wanted internationally for serious crimes and there are strong indications that he is currently in Sierra Leone. Recent reports, including by Reuters, suggest that Lejakers, considered one of Europe's most wanted fugitives, is enjoying high-level protection in the country. Following that information, Freetown announced it will launch an investigation and cooperate with the Netherlands if there was an extradition request. However, Dutch Justice Minister Wilton did not provide additional details about the phone conversation with Alpha Cisse regarding the alleged presence of the drug lord or if an official extradition request has been submitted. It is worth noting that no extradition treaty was signed between the Netherlands and Sierra Leone. And before the break, let's take you to Côte d'Ivoire, where the former head of the anti-drug unit of the port of Abidjan and his co-defendants and tried in a cocaine diversion case have been sentenced to 5 years in prison by the criminal court. The facts date back to 2022 with the arrest of a first suspect, an informant of the anti-drug unit, in whose home investigators discovered 37 grams of cocaine. According to the investigation, the drugs found at the informant's house were part of a shipment intercepted a few weeks earlier. You are listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM Dakar, Senegal, and across the world on WADR.org. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger deployed troops under the United Forces to curb terrorism at the tri-border area. Benin gets an aerial surveillance aircraft from the European Union to scale up its anti-terrorism campaign. The Netherlands contacts Sierra Leone seeking the extradition of a drug lord, and Nigeria and China strengthen collaboration against fake news. Still ahead in the news, we have the guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Many thanks for staying with us. And now to some legal matters. The National Endowment for Democracy, NED, has filed a lawsuit in the United States District Court against executive branch agencies and officials for unlawfully withholding its congressionally appropriated funding, which is essential to fulfilling its statutory mandate of advancing democracy around the world. NED is in court over what it says is a wrongful denial of access to $167 million in already obligated funds. HR Tisu tells us more.
Details of the lawsuit state that the U.S. government also refused to release an additional $72 million already appropriated by Congress to NED, an action that has severely disrupted its operations. This has further impacted its workforce and jeopardized its ability to support democracy organizations resisting authoritarian regimes. According to Peter Roskam, NED board chair, and I quote, NED is a venture capital fund for democracy, with 83% of its resources going directly to support people fighting for freedom of speech, thought, and religion, end of quote. He added that the sudden withholding of NED funds endangers it and cripples a force multiplier for America's national interest, since its work secures American security, prosperity, and global leadership. NED's lawsuit does not concern foreign assistance funding, but rather on funds that the U.S. Congress appropriates specifically for it each year under Title I of State Department appropriations legislation. For more than 40 years, NED, a private non-profit grant-making foundation dedicated to the development and strengthening of democratic institutions around the world, has played a critical role in countering the influence of authoritarian regimes like China, Iran, and Cuba.
A report filed in by Echi Atisu, and just before the guest interview in the wake of suspension of aid through the United States Agency of International Development, USAID, the United Nations is releasing a total of $110 million to support humanitarian action worldwide. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs OCHA said the fund will particularly benefit countries in Africa. The agency on Thursday explained that the fund aimed to compensate for what it called the precipitous decline in funding for aid interventions. Tom Fletcher, the head of OCHA, stressed that abrupt funding cuts do not mean disappearing humanitarian needs for countries hit by conflict, climate change, and economic turmoil. Fletcher said a third of the allocated fund will support the humanitarian response in Sudan, a country currently facing the world's worst humanitarian crisis since civil war began in April 2023. Other beneficiaries include Chad, Mauritania, Niger, the Central African Republic, Somalia, Zambia, Afghanistan, Honduras, and Venezuela.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is The Guest.
Our guest is Executive Director of Integrity Watch Liberia, Harold Aido, who has stressed the urgent need for collective efforts to tackle corruption in the country, especially in the natural resource sector. Aido wants the government to consider the critical importance of ensuring that the benefits of the country's resources reach the common people. He urged stakeholders from various sectors to work together in fostering transparency and integrity, ultimately aiming to create a sustainable framework that empowers local communities and enhances the nation's economic well-being. He has been speaking to my colleague, Imoradat.
We from civil society, or as Integrity Watch Liberia, are particularly a bit happy that we see a more exerted effort on the part of the presidency to be able to address some of the corrupt practices or issue around government officials stealing money and taking them, and into foreign countries and other state assets and so forth. So we are particularly happy that the government is taking some steps towards that. But we have a number of fundamental issues with the asset recovery. As you may be aware, we already have the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission. Now, our call as civil society is not to have power structures and then also weaken the anti-corruption institutions. We have consistently called on the government to strengthen the existing structure, particularly the anti-graft institutions, in this case, the Anti-Corruption Commission and the General Auditing Commission. Yes, we applaud the president for seemingly showing within the public space that yes, he wants to be able to extend the mandate of the asset recovery team in order to be able to fight, recover state looted asset or, quote unquote assets, but either in terms of fiscal or, material and other resources that belongs to government to recover them. But we believe that this is not a sustainable approach. We believe that the sustainable approach should be to strengthen the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission, to empower it, to give it the adequate resources to be able to recruit the human resource capital that it requires, the logistical capacity it needs to be able to execute its mandate. This is a more sustainable way. But we feel that, setting up a power structure, without adequately supporting and strengthening existing institutions, we think it's not sustainable.
Well, do you think the ineffectiveness of these government parastatals or agencies that have been on ground inform the president in establishing this task force and even further extending their mandate and for an additional year?
I don't think so. So you can only evaluate the effectiveness of an institution when the institution has been adequately resourced, right? For protracted period of time, civil society has been championing, has been advocating and calling for the government to be able to provide the needed resources to these state institutions. But we have seen feet dragging and, lukewarm attitude towards that. As you can see, we've seen remarkable transformation from the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission, particularly the way it has handled government institutions and agencies and individuals who, for example, have failed to declare their asset. If you've been following the news, for example, the president did suspend, hundreds of officials who have failed to declare their assets. And this work has been, was led as a result to the work of the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission. We have developed a digital platform for citizens to report corruption, and there has been several corruption allegations being made across the country with multiple reports coming in. The anti-corruption institution does not have adequate prosecutors. It does not have adequate investigators. It is not adequately resourced to be able to follow up on these issues and sometimes to go to court. So, you cannot evaluate the effectiveness of an institution when they don't have the resources to be able to execute its mandate. So I think the government needs to be able to live up to its commitment and stop the lip service. I think we should stop window dressing some of these issues and make sure that we take the bull by the horn and resolve the issues from its root causes and make sure that the perennial issues of inadequacy in resources to many of these anti-corruption institutions are addressed. That is the only way we can emphatically and with evidence say that these institutions are not effective and we can take the rightful step to make sure that we strengthen them. But beyond that, I believe that the actions to be able to set up power structures that are performing the mandates that are constitutionally and statutorily are allocated to specific ministries and agencies are not sustainable. And we, in a way, sometimes one will also want to question the sincerity of the president to actually fight corruption.
Mr. Harold, thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you for having me.
Harold Aido, the Executive Director of Integrity Watch, Liberia. Up next is Sports News with Sankule Janko.
Hello there, warm welcome and thank you for joining us. Niger's President of the National Council for the Safeguarding of the Fatherland, Brigadier General Abdurrahman Tiani, has given his official endorsement to Colonel Major Jibril Hamidou, commonly known as Pele, for the upcoming FIFA Council elections, according to africasoccer.net. The announcement was made by Niger's Minister of Sports, Colonel Major Abdurrahman Amadou, who confirmed that he and Hima were received by President Tiani to formalize the candidacy. The FIFA Council elections are set to take place in March 2025 in Cairo, Egypt, where representatives from across Africa will compete for a seat in world football's highest decision-making body. Hima, currently the president of the Niger Football Federation, FENIFOOT, has reportedly played an influential role in the country's football administration. His bid for a seat on FIFA Council represents an opportunity for Niger to gain stronger representation on the global football stage, Africa Soccer reports. Elsewhere, Burkina Faso has included former Ivory Coast youth midfielder Mohamed Zougrana in its squad for the upcoming 2026 FIFA World Cup qualifiers this month. The midfielder, who represented Ivory Coast at youth level, has been included in the Burkina Faso's double outings against Djibouti and Guinea-Bissau in the 5th and 6th rounds of the qualifying series. Despite featuring for Ivory Coast at the youth level, the enterprising midfielder has switched allegiance to represent his native country. At the international level, it has been reported that Ivorian Zugrana is expected to play a huge role for Burkina Faso's national team as they seek to secure qualification to the World Cup to be held in USA, Canada and Mexico, according to media reports. And that's it for sports. It's back to you.
And with that, we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Majo Juf and Sheikh Kinjai for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via our social media platforms, X, Instagram at WADR English, on Facebook, WADR English Service, and stream live on WADR.org. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is a replay of our security and governance program in the Sahel, and to be followed by the news brief in French at top of the hour of 7 p.m. I'm Abdullah Hassan. Good evening.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.